As we continue to talk about the caste system of India, I want you to look at India. I want you to look at its geography. I want you to look at where it lies as far as Asia. Because you see, as far as Asia, it is India that is in the middle, almost directly in the middle of everything. It's close to Africa. It's close to Mesopotamia, otherwise known as the Middle East. It's close to China and Korea. You see? And as people, as different tribes, different people begin to migrate from Africa to India, from Mesopotamia to India, from other parts of Asia into India, what you had was different color as well as different languages of people. And of course, when I say from Africa to India, criticism of historians and criticism of others who have studied India, the one criticism that always comes up is the fact that, well, there is no such thing as the Afro-Indian or the Black Indian. And to that criticism I say this: it depends on what your idea of black and white is, because usually black and white is determined by facial features and grain of hair. But you see, I would say that idea of black and white today, as we go from 2008 into 2009, is obsolete. Because here we are in 2008 going into 2009, and we still call each other black and white. All the technological advances that the world has experienced, and we still sit down here today and call each other black and white. And then if there's someone of European descent that tans a lot, or if there's someone that whose mother or father is of European descent, and then the other spouse is of African descent, we'll say, well, you're tan. You see? So getting back to the point, I would say that what you had happen was the inedible happened. And what is that? Wars and fighting. Fighting and wars. Fighting over land, over distribution, over the fertile soil, constantly regenerated by the endless Ganges rivers. You see? And when these wars were over, and everything said was done, what you had was a division of the people. How do you divide yourself in ancient times such as this? How do you think? Simple. You divide yourself black by what's easiest to distinguish yourself. Color. The easiest way to distinguish yourself. And that is why to this day it is people like this, and people like this man, and people like this woman, the more European looking, the lighter skin India that is presented to the world. But you see, there's something else that happened. Something else in the history of India that changed the history of India as we know it. And it changed India forever. But what it did, even more than that, was it solidified the caste system of India. It made it even more solid. And that event that took place is this. Do you recognize this flag? And do you know which company this flag represents? It is a symbol of the British East Indian Company. You see, when the British arrived in India, they didn't arrive as conquerors. In the beginning, they arrived as businessmen. wanting to do business. And the way that the British moved up into power is by I'll say it like this, rubbing elbows with those higher up in the caste system, rubbing elbows with those of lighter skin tone, with those that were the higher ups of India. Another thing is the fact that the British were seen more as peacemakers between the different Rajas and the different regimes, until eventually, of course, as history tells us, they became too powerful. The British East Indian Company was taken over by the British military, and history takes its place from there. But what I'm getting at is this. Here's a photo of the British Empire. I want you to understand what I'm talking about. And I'm going to take but a sliver of the former British Empire, and I'm going to use one of those countries as an example. And that country I will use is Jamaica. You see, the inhabitants of Jamaica today are not the original inhabitants of the land. They're not. They are the descendants of slaves brought to Jamaica as laborers, forced to do work and labor on the many plantations of Jamaica. And so what you have is an island full of people who are actually not the original inhabitants, but they live there. And you see this not only in Jamaica, you see it in almost all the former British colonies, a reliance on African slave labor. You see it in Guyana. You see it in Trinidad and Tobago. You see it even in the United States. But what's the point? Let's continue. The point is this. So when the British entered India, why there was no need to bring slaves with them, or slaves to do labor. Why bother? Why go through the fuss? Why do it when there's already a system set up equal to slavery? When there's already a group of when there's already a group of people treated as slaves and used as laborers. You see? And this is how the caste system was solidified even more. It was made more solid. And of course the higher ups of the caste system began to rub elbows with the British. They were the ones who could afford to have their children learn to speak proper English, to have their children learn how to read and write, which is still a problem today in India. They were the ones who could afford to convert to the changing tide of this new British Empire being built in India, even though I believe at that time they hadn't realized it yet. So you see, now what you had a new class of upper class Indian created, and they still exist today. You see them. They dress differently, their lifestyle is differently. They've gone to school in the United States or Europe in schools such as Oxford or Harvard or Cornell. They have vacation houses in Guyana or Jamaica. You see them. And this is what has, as I said and I will say again, has solidified the caste system. It's made it even more separated. But let us go on even further.